Hey everyone, it's the Canadian Libertarian once again doing another video, answering the call. This is something that I've been trying to expand upon, and I'm going to continue to expand upon, where I can bring in more voices, more opinions, and I have been trying to reach out to those who have more counter opinions to my own, those who are of particular ideologies, those who promote anti-capitalist ideologies such as socialists or communists, or those that are into cultural Marxism or postmodernists. So far, those type of people don't want to answer the call, but we do have lots of people that are willing to stand up for truth, logic, reason, and putting forth their information and putting forth their stance on all these topics and issues that are very important and the kind of things that we have to discuss. This is the most important thing, as far as I'm concerned, is the discussion of these ideas. The only way that you can disinfect bad ideas is to shine light on them. Now, today I'm going to be talking with my son, Matthew Hunter. So we will have a lot of similarities as far as the stance we'll take on particular positions, but there are definitely nuanced differences. There are definitely points to ponder where we do have differences of opinion. So I just want to bring them into the conversation today so that we can expand on some particular topics that we both care tremendously about. And one in particular, the one we're going to be starting off, is the gun control debate. I mean, my goodness, I've heard this constant hammer, and I've listened to it for years. I mean, since I was a young man, I've heard this stuff constantly talked about. And it's so important that we now have access to the information age and these platforms such as YouTube, where we can put forth and present our ideas and talk about these things, whereas before it was, you might have been able to talk about it in your inner circle, to your friends, maybe your family, maybe in your echo chamber. But we have the ability now to reach out to millions of people ultimately, and this is what we have to do. We have to talk about these ideas and give opinions that the mainstream media will not present to the people.
Yeah, so our last video we talked a lot about the positives of Trump. We also did some criticizing a few things of his policies that we didn't want to agree with. And I suggest that we do another video now that he's come out with his stance on the gun control and stuff like that. And it's kind of pandering to the left, passing some of the laws that they requested he do. And I just wanted to make sure that we do this video to show anyone who's viewing that we're not completely behind Trump all the time. We're not just there to worship the guy. We understand that he brings value to pushing the narrative towards more individual freedom, but we also can critique him, and we're not just on the Trump train just because we worship the guy. So definitely his remarks lately on the whole school shooting in Florida, and the left pushing, of course, more gun control, and very, very evil way that they use these children as a way to push forth their narrative. Very, very sick thing to do, to literally use dead children to try to push gun control. And so definitely I want to talk that with my father today and talk about how Trump did come out and said that unremarkable quote there when talking with Mike Pence and them, that how he would take the guns first and then go through the legal action and due process. So that sent up major red flags, and I'm glad to see a lot of those on the right and those who were Trump supporters to kind of give them a little backlash about that, and how that no, it has to be due process. And if you give the government that kind of authority to take guns before due process, well, you give that kind of authority to government, there's always the chance that they're going to abuse it, and government has a history of abusing it. And what if they then label those who are in opposition of their views? Let's say you get a leftist in presidency, and maybe he labels people who are pushing our ideas, like we see now. People on the right are labeled Nazi and sexist and misogynist. You start putting people in this demonizing situation, tearing their name down, making them out to be a terrible person. Well, if you give government the authority to take weapons and before due process, what if they start labeling us on the right as mentally deficient or dangerous or violent, like the left like to do? And then that opens up the doors for them taking our weapons and stuff like that. So definitely completely opposed to any kind of gun control on the right. We understand that the gun is just a tool. If people want to kill people and do evil things, they can find ways. I mean, the biggest thing that I like to bring up is the whole people using trucks. So even if you eliminated all the guns in the United States are all in Canada. Truly, is it that hard to go to the U-Haul and rent a big U-Haul truck, go to a populated place downtown and run your vehicle through a crowd of people? It's not hard to kill people. If people want to commit murder and kill people en masse, the gun is just a tool. So people say, oh, well, semi-auto rifles or these weapons that fire with bump stocks at a faster rate can do more damage. Well, so could a big truck going through the crowd of protesters or a crowd of people. Let's say, let's look at the Vegas thing. It was a concert with people all piled in watching the concert in a tight knit area. If someone ran a truck through that massive crowd, that's going to do just as much damage as someone sitting on the top of, let's say, the 10th floor firing down with bullets. So the gun is just a tool to an end, and Trump knows that, and it was very discerning to see him kind of pander and give in to the left. And now they want to raise the age, so it's not, you can't buy a gun at 18, it's got to be 21. They want to ban bump stocks now. He said he's going to write an executive order to get that done, and these other things that is pushing us towards more taking of our Second Amendment rights. When the Supreme Court and the judges in the United States and the Constitution has made it very, very clear, it's been argued many times in the Supreme Court, that it's got to be taken as it was written. You have the right to self-defense, period. Doesn't matter. And another thing I see a lot of the people on the right bringing up, which is a good point and which is what we should pound into the left, is they like to bring up violence with guns. Now, there's like 30 or so thousand, you can look up the actual statistics, 30 or so thousand people that die a year in the United States from gun crime, from the weapons and stuff like that. So, once you take out of that 30,000 suicides, it almost drops it in half. So you're looking at 15, let's even be generous and say 20,000 that are actually killed. Now you start removing your gangbangers that are just shooting each other, having turf wars and stuff like that. It even lowers the risk of gun violence, being killed by guns even more. And when you get down to the actual numbers of people going out and committing mass shootings, you're talking about a small peanuts of number who actually die by the hands of these weaponry. But now nobody wants to talk about, and I see the right bringing it up now, the statistics behind people that are being saved by weapons. So people that are going into rob a store, the person at the clerk has a weapon and defends himself, or a passerby or walking by witnesses a crime, uses a gun to defend himself or another person. Now those numbers are staggering. There's hundreds of thousands of people that are saved every day, hundreds of thousands saved every year, not by day, I mean every year, by having guns. So yes, 30,000, let's say, people die from guns, but hundreds of thousands are saved from guns. So why would we not ever take that into account? So it's just, I just want to point that out and just point out the hypocrisy of the left when they push this gun control. It has nothing to do with saving lives. I mean, more people die from health problems, eating crappy food and having heart attack and diabetes and all that stuff. So the actual people that die at the hands of mass shooting, AR-15 weapons and stuff like that, very, very small. So I'll pass it back to my father if he has any remarks on that as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, to me, the biggest thing that I take away from all these stupid gun debates is just read the Constitution and understand the very reasoning behind whether you want to. Okay, so let's say you're an atheist and you don't believe in God. They use the term inalienable. Now, in some aspects of the Federalist Paper and some of those founding fathers of the U.S., they were religious, so you can also use the term God. But basically, no matter if you're an atheist or if you're a believer in God, your rights come from the sheer fact that you are born as a free, and the U.S. Constitution acknowledges you're born as a free human being, right? And the whole point of inalienable rights, which first and foremost was the freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of association, da-da-da-da-da. But if you're going to talk about having freedoms, and the founding fathers are people that left old world Europe and understood intrinsically what it means, how you can actually make freedoms come to exist. Someone spewing words out of their mouth doesn't mean shit, because that's not going to give you freedoms. If an asshole's coming at you with a baseball bat trying to swing it at your head, you can say all you want, hey, that's illegal, but your head's going to get crushed. The words aren't going to stop them. What's going to stop your opponent or a criminal or an authoritarian government or an external entity or an external government from threatening you is your ability to defend. It's the whole point of the Second Amendment. This is what really fucking pisses me off, because it doesn't take much. I mean, kids go through 12, 13 years of education, and if you've come out on the other side of that without understanding that you have basically no rights or freedoms, without your freedom, without your right to defend your freedoms. This is the thing. People talk about, oh, the U.S. is the last place on the planet. Everyone else has figured out. Well, no. If you look at how many bases the U.S. has around the world, if you look at how much power and authority the U.S. has to impose their mandates or edicts, it's because they have that force. Force, you know, it can be used for good and it can use for bad. But these other countries that have no gun rights, they rely on the U.S. protecting their fucking asses. That's another thing that pisses me off. Is, yeah, you can talk about these Nordic countries. You can talk about some of these other countries that have disarmed their populations, or even Canada with, we kind of have a little bit of a quasi-gun right. It was a little bit entrenched in our culture basically because of the fact that we live in a very northern climate, and we, you know, had to hunt a lot of times before there was modern amenities. So we still have some gun rights, but the fact that Canada and Canadians can sit and down talk about the Americans, what I would love to do as an experiment, but I mean, I wouldn't want to do it out in real life, but if you could put it on in a simulator where you could experiment, okay, take away the Americans, that last line of defense against authoritarianism, against forced subjugation, against collectivism, against socialism, against communism, against fascism. Take and fucking make the American people helpless like the rest of the world, and you'd find out real quickly. Of course, by that time, those lessons are going to be learned really, really hard. If you get to the point where you have to learn your lesson that way, then, like I say, I don't even know how you would ever find your way back from that. You know, there might not be enough people left, because the amount of death and destruction that would be the consequence, the result of disarming the people. The whole reason why a lot of these countries that would just love to impose their will, their edicts and their preferences on the American people, they've tried it basically since the inception of the United States. The reason why they've never been able to do so is because the Americans and the Japanese emperor himself recognized there's basically a fucking gun behind every blade of grass in the U.S. So what are you going to do? You can't try to take over the people from an outsider perspective, and even the domestic governments, as tyrannical as they might wish to be, what restrains them is the very fact that the American people understand as not just a far-off premise, but entrenched in their very constitution, that they have the right to defend themselves. And as long as you have the right to defend yourself, that is the one way, the only method to prevent others from trying to impose their will on you. Take it, if you don't want to think of things as far as the government and the people, think about it in your own life. Have you ever been bullied? If you've ever been bullied in your life, how did you ever prevent a bully from bullying you further? You know it wasn't by begging them. You know it wasn't by pleading with them. You know it wasn't by giving them their lunch money every time and hoping they would leave you alone. No, you either grew big enough that you could challenge them properly, or you maybe had a friend that was bigger than them, but it required a means of force, not preemptive force, but a defensive force. And without that defensive force, well, you're just looking to create more and more helpless victims. This is what bothers me, and this is the thing that people need to understand, especially people on the left. They constantly talk about wanting to disarm people. And why? Why? But why? So this guy killed someone, you know, whether it's the Florida shooter, no matter which instance you want to use. This person did not, obviously there's laws on the books all over the place, you know, you're not allowed to kill. There's plenty of laws that if this person actually give a shit about, you know, edicts written on a piece of paper, they would have restrained themselves accordingly. So this tells you that obviously laws, writing something on a piece of paper, is not a proper way to defend yourself against people that are evil, who want to carry out vile and despicable acts. The way you defend yourself is giving people the pretense or the opportunity to defend themselves. And I've said this in past videos too. You might not even have to. Like, another thing that does kind of bother me is when I hear all these people, oh, let's just arm all the teachers. Fuck Jesus Christ. Nobody wants to walk into a school or go to a school where everybody's armed to their teeth. What kind of world do we want to live in here, people? But I'll tell you, the Second Amendment has already got that covered. It's called, even if your state that you live in, if your state has a concealed carry, if you're allowed to have a concealed carry permit, then any intruder or any criminal, they don't know if you don't have to necessarily have a gun on you. You don't have to arm all the teachers. But if these criminals, these bad actors know that there's a potential, because unless they're just pure suicidal, and in that kind of situation, like Matt said, if a person has that suicidal tendency where they want to take others out with them, well, take away his gun. Okay, that's fine. He'll just find a truck or a van or a cargo van filled, like in Oklahoma in the 90s, fill it full of explosives and manure and blow up shit. Or, hey, hijack an airplane. I mean, there's many ways you can kill people, right? So a suicidal person that's just looking to take others out with them, there's no way you can prevent that. And this is another thing before I tie this up, is security and safety over freedom and liberty. Now, if you want absolute security and safety, I'm going to tell you right now, although even that doesn't play out, although a lot of people like to pretend this as well. If you want safety and security to the nth degree, where you feel as safe, as secure as you possibly can be, well, go lock yourself in the goddamn fucking penitentiary, maximum security penitentiary, and you will have that security. You will 100%, if you lock yourself in like a very small confined space, you will be safe, well, other than maybe the guards, but you're basically safe from anything in the outside world has to offer. But have you got any freedoms? That's where it comes down to, is I accept the fact that there are bad things may happen. That's just what it is to be a human being living on a big gigantic rock, flying through space thousands of miles an hour. I accept that there are potential dangers everywhere. And it's not because of guns. I mean, I could walk out tomorrow across the street and some idiot's paying attention, texting on his phone and kill me, right? There's all kinds of dangers. I'm not going to tell people you can't drive vehicles. I'm not going to tell people you can't do this. I just, and it actually makes me a more competent person to know that there are potential dangers, and I have to prepare myself and be more defensive in nature so that I'm more aware of my surroundings and I'm capable to do what I can do to at least greatly reduce or, as best as I can, eliminate any potential threats. Now, it'll never get to the point where there's no potential threat to my life, but I'm willing to accept that because my freedoms, my liberties require that. If I want to close myself off from the rest of society or make it myself so that I have this ultimate safe space where I can't be harmed, injured, or have any threat to my life imposed upon me, well, that means I'm not living either. And I don't want to live in a world where I have to close myself off to the point or be constantly fearful and mindful of the constant threat, because then I'm not living my life. A person that's living their life is someone that is of least concern of external threats, dangers. It's being prepared, but willing to accept that to live as a free human being, there's always going to be threats to your life and to your livelihood.
Absolutely, and the only things I would add to that would be we always have like in today's society, we have a very short attention span to the news cycles and all that other kind of things, and people on the left and people who are staunch want gun control, stuff like that, never take into account that guns have been a part of the American culture since the founding. So we've always had these type of weaponry there in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. There was AR-15s back then as well, in the 90s and stuff, but you never seen the school shootings back in the day. When I went to school, which was only 10 plus years ago, there was no school shootings in the news. Columbine, a one or two that happened once in a blue moon. So instead of attacking the tool, the gun, what is at the root of the problem? Why did we always have guns before, but all of a sudden is this school shooting such a more popular way of committing mass murder? Now, I would explain it, give my amateur opinion, would be, one is the media definitely plays a key role in this by giving these shooters a platform, by putting their face and name out there, which sends a message to copycats to make it a competition to see who can get the most kills, who can get the most infamy from this as well. So I think that has to be addressed. If there's a school shooting, sure, say there was a school shooting, but give the person who did the school shooting no fame. Don't blast his name out there. Don't blast his photo, so that when these people do these things, they know that they're not going to get any fame or infamy from it. It's not going to be talked about. I think doing that will definitely somewhat play a key into lessening this. Also as well, what do I look at it, I'm like, okay, so back then there wasn't school shootings. Now, what's changed in society? Well, now it's everyone's patriarchy, and there's a big attack on white males, and white males are privileged and crap, and ruling the world and taking advantage of minorities. So you're disingenuizing these young males, and who are committing majority of these school shootings? Young white males, the same type of people that are being demonized in today's society. So that has to be cut out. Young males have to be encouraged to want to be strong and productive, and be responsible. Stuff like Jordan Peterson preaches, clean your room, get your head out of your ass, stick your head up straight, that type of thing. And that's not what we're now. It's all just victim blaming white males, and I think that's what's also playing a role in this. The society has shifted to blame these young men, to make them feel like they're holding all these other minorities and other people down. And this is why they're getting these antisocial behaviors, and a lot of them going on these medications because they're depressed, and society's making them out to be the bad guys. So all these things are the underlying problems of these school shootings, which nobody wants to talk about. They just want to attack the guns. And it's just about taking the rights from the people. It's just about slowly infringing. And everyone's always a staunch supporter of the First Amendment. Now, not so much the Antifa aspect of the left, but I'm not going to put the left in that category that they're all Antifa. You still got the left that are somewhat reasonable and are even somewhat supportive of free speech. Well, how is free speech? It's the First Amendment, but how is that protected? That's why guns is the Second Amendment, because without the Second Amendment, you don't have the First Amendment, because how do you defend the First Amendment, right? So the guns are there to defend the First Amendment. And already we see the attacks on the censorship and all that type of stuff. So, when the guns do get taken, if they do, watch out, because the First Amendment's right after that, and there's no way to defend yourself against that. And they're already starting with that through these private companies like YouTube, Google, and all that, censoring people on the right. And yeah, so we definitely have to address the root cause of what's causing these young boys to go and shoot up these schools, rather than the tool, because like I stated previous, the tools have always been there, but the society has shifted. So I'll hand it off to you now.
Yeah, well, I mean, that to me, I was just listening to Joe Rogan interviewing, what is it, Charles Murray, I believe his name is.
Douglas Murray, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that's it, Douglas Murray. And I keep hearing this time and time again, and it's one of the few things that I just, when I hear Joe Rogan talking about this stuff, it's like, Jesus, Joe, just pay attention, just listen, stop trying to cater to, and I get it, he lives in the belly of the beast as far as the leftists, right? I mean, he's down there in Southern California, so I get, and he's probably had to function in an environment where he has to appease and appeal to these people on a continuing, ongoing basis. So I can kind of understand it, but he's been willing to challenge the predominant narrative, whether it's from the right or the left. So it's one of the very few areas where I see that Joe seems to be wanting to continuously hedge his bets rather than being truly principled. And what I would say to Joe, not like I don't think Joe is going to be watching my video anytime soon, but I would just say, if he ever did see it, Joe, listen, just think about this for a minute, man. Do you actually believe that just one more writing of another law, or let's just say another thing I hear when he talks about is trying to blame it on the mental capacity of these people. Listen, when you start down that road, I mean, maybe some of these people are on some of these drugs, but think about how many people in the United States are on those exact same drugs and haven't gone out and killed a bunch of people. So you can't, once again, you can't even just necessarily blame it on the drugs they may be on. They may very well be a contributing factor, no doubt. But that person, it's that person, it's that individual, Joe. Come on, Joe, you understand you're an American, for Christ's sakes. It's all about the individual. Hold an individual to account. Do not collectivize guilt. This man was an individual person that did something heinous. He committed a very violent crime that caused the death for a lot of people, and there's going to be a lot of families going to suffer a whole lot of time. And we're all out there. We're all experiencing this. And because, I mean, unless you're a sociopath, you feel empathy to these people. And I hate hearing people say, oh, the right, they just don't give a shit. They're all about the gun rights. And Joe says this too. Oh, the NRA or this person. Like, holy fuck, Joe. Read the Constitution, man. Read it. Please, read the Constitution and you'll understand. It's not about that these people are just forgetting about these poor dead people, these 17 dead people. It's that they know, because every time these political opportunists, they know that every fucking time a school shooting or some rampant spree happens, that the leftists, the opportunists, the authoritarians are going to use that as a means, as an example, to use your compassion. And you're falling for it, Joe. They're using your compassion. Listen, we all care about them. Like I say, I care about these poor kids. I mean, I don't know them personally, but I am a father myself. You know, I was a son. We all have our own personal life experiences that we can correlate and associate with, where somebody in our family or someone we cared about might have gone through some unnecessarily pain, suffering, or ultimately died. We all have the capacity to show empathy. Doesn't mean that we're going to use our empathy as a means to allow other people to just run bullshit propaganda narratives over us so that we'll just yield to their whims, to their edicts, and say, okay, yeah, go ahead, start infringing on the rights. The whole point of the Second Amendment, that's another thing. It was written in there. They could have written it a million different ways, but it said cannot or shall not be infringed. Shall not be infringed. They understood. They left old world Europe. The kings, the queens, the monarchs of Europe, you know, they were constantly using these authoritarian methods and trying to impose their mandates, their edicts on the American people, the American founders. That's why they knew instinctively that you can't even just write things on parchment paper. You have to make it very easily understood. And the do not and shall not infringe was of fundamental importance. That's the reason why it was put in there. It's because there cannot be a point or any time, not whether it's back then in the 1780s or in the 2018, you can't use politics, you can't use emotion to try to compromise or destroy legitimate rights of people to have the ability to defend themselves. And too many people want to avoid the fact that they talk about using guns as oh, it was used for hunting. Or listen, hunting was one aspect because back in those days we didn't have modern meat markets, right? So yes, gun rights were, a lot of it might have had to do with people hunting, but that wasn't the reason why they said they formed a militia. The whole point of having a militia without a standing army, the whole point why the U.S. had standing militias instead of a standing army is because militias are people that represent their particular community. So they understand and they're going to want to defend it. Just like if you own a house, you're more willing to defend your house than you are, someone's house 1,000 miles away. And without a standing army, that standing army cannot be used by political edict against the people. So the premise, everything that the Founding Fathers entrenched in regards to the Second Amendment was all about giving people to defend themselves in every area, whether through, like I say, domestic criminals, through authoritarian governments, or foreign actors or foreign governments trying to take over your country. It's all about defending yourself. So stop using these political decrees or these emotion-based sentiment, which, like I say, let's get all of the way here. Everyone that's going to talk about the gun debate, first and foremost, should say the first thing out of their mouth should be, yes, I care about these poor kids that were killed unnecessarily. I think we would all agree on that. The whole thing, though, Joe, the whole thing is, what are we going to do? We're going to try to what? Eliminate people's rights and hope that that'll somehow prevent criminals from being criminals? And just to tie in real quickly before I finish this up, I wanted to bring in two. In addition to the fact that there's already 300 million guns, so there's just, it's as utopian as humanly possible for anyone to think that you're going to, go in and confiscate the guns of the American people. 300 million of them. Do you know what kind of civil war? Do you know what kind of conflict? Do you know how many deaths would be a result of trying to disarm people that have 300 million guns at their disposal? But in addition to that, we live in the modern age, the modern era where we have technology that people like Cody Wilson, he's already circumvented any concept. So you could write as many laws as you want. You could double down, triple down. You can create as many layers of bureaucracy as you want, an authoritarian methodology, but it's not going to prevent someone from getting their hands on a 3D printing machine that costs a couple grand that now can print whatever you want. You want a gun, you want a Glock, you want a receiver for your AR that actually doesn't even have any identifiers. It's all out there. So there's no way to put this genie back in the bottle. All right? I need Joe and I need anyone else out there that's anti-gun, or anyone, well, Joe's not anti-gun, but even tries to play that middle ground. There's no way to put the genie back in the bottle. The genie is out of the bottle, all right? Now, the only thing that's going to help us going forward is to change, the culture of what's happening. What's the reason why these things, these shootings are happening is because, yes, there's this identity politics, this group mentality, this group thing where it's pitting each other or groups against each other. That's a way to create conflict. When you subdivide groups of people and pit them against each other as far as ideology, that's why the whole premise of the individual rights, that's how important it is. Because if you play identity politics, which is what collectivism is all about, pitting people into groups and showing that they're opponents, oppressors versus oppressed, then you have already started. You're basically someone that has already lit the match or already lit the spark that's going to turn into a big, gigantic fire. My point is through economic prosperity, through actual genuine freedoms, and people having the capacity to defend themselves and live by their proper morality, where it's, we all understand this, and we've understood this, most of us, since we were kids. Don't hit, don't steal, don't. As long as we all understand and we entrench a proper mentality as far as culture, just like in your family, when you're raising your family, you got to create your family, you got to raise your family in a manner so that they'll be peaceful, productive, ambitious members of society that just want to get along and prosper from each other and benefit from each other. As long as you create that atmosphere, then you've almost eliminated, I would say, I'm just pulling this out of my ass here, but you've already eliminated 90-some% of any of these potential threats, of these potential dangers. When you create this political strife, which is what's happening today, it's this constant, it's us versus them, ideology versus ideology. Once you create this basis, this platform where it's us versus them, where it's whoever's trying to take over the big gigantic gun in the room, there's already the psychology that's needed, that's necessary to create a very disturbed culture that's built off of fear and have disdain and loathe people, that they have these weird perceptions. Nowadays, there's people that, whether you're a feminist, LGBT, black, now when they look at, because of this propagation of all this political propaganda regards anti-white male and the patriarchy, now you've got people that might have had no pretense in the past of hating on white people because they might have known them personally in the past, but now there's a little thing in their back of the head keeps thinking, oh, maybe they are. Oh, damn, maybe they are my oppressor. Maybe they are a representation of a danger, a threat to my own liberties. And now they're already on their back heels. They're already in confrontation mode. So it's the media, it's the politicians, it's those that are using the divide and conquer mentality, that whole cultural Marxism, that oppressor versus the oppressed. It's those people that use envy and resentment as a means to their political or ideological end. Those are the people that are creating the true divisions in society. You remove these people and don't give them the platform. I mean, if they want to create their own platform, do it. But why the hell does the media want to place them front and center when you got people like myself or people like my son, or you get many of us out here trying to talk in a contrary position to this bullshit authoritarianism, left versus right, me versus you, us versus them. We're out here trying to just say, listen, we're all individuals. Can we try to live together peacefully? Is the media giving us any attention? No. So that should tell you first and foremost that those in the media and your political masters, those who are trying to affect your minds, and those in academia, they are so ideologically driven, they are more than willing to sacrifice many, many people for the sake of gaining that gigantic gun in the room and having their position or authority to impose their will, their mandates, and their edicts on everyone else. Take the concentration of attention on those people. Take it away from them, all right? Focus it on the things that matter most: morality, economic prosperity, social freedom, social liberties. If you put an emphasis, if the political class, the pundit class, put an emphasis on promoting the things that matter most to people and giving them a sense of self-reliance and ambition and a true meaning in life, well, the rest of it will all fall into place, folks. I guarantee it.
And one last thing I'd add about Joe is I've noticed with Joe that depending on the guests he has, he kind of sometimes he can get confrontational, but I find he kind of adapts his views and what he speaks about depending on the guests he has on. So if he has a guest like Sam Harris or someone who's totally opposed to Trump, which we'll talk about Sam Harris a little later in the video, but he'll kind of like they'll both feed off each other and bash Trump. But when he had Alex Jones on, which I would add, it was the most popular and viral video that Rogan's ever done on the podcast. And it's very strange to me that he hasn't had Alex back on since then. He's had many guests, but never brought Alex back after that. If you went back and listened to that podcast of Joe and Alex talking, they talk about Trump a bit, and it sounds like Trump is or Alex and him agree on a lot of things that Trump says. And then you throw on Harris, who hates Trump, and then Joe starts bashing on Trump. So I found it very strange that, like I said, Joe had Alex on. It was one of the most popular podcasts Joe has ever done since he's had the Joe Rogan podcast out. And since then, there's been so much more stuff in the news cycle that it'd be a perfect ideal time to bring Alex back on. And why not if he's so popular when he comes on your podcast platform? And Alex would be that perfect one that would be able to hold Joe's feet to the fire and be like, listen, Joe, you know gun control doesn't work. You know Trump isn't as bad as how you put him out to be. Like, Joe will even say things like Trump is stupid, or with Harris and like stuff like that, he'll just say that, they'll bash on his policies and stuff. But if you had Alex there, he'd be able to call him out on that. And I think that podcast has to happen again. And I hope the community kind of says, let's get these two together again, because then we can actually hear Alex hold Joe's feet to the fire when it comes to the Trump thing. Because I don't understand why Rogan is so opposed to Trump. Because, obviously we're speaking from the libertarian view here. We understand the principles of non-aggression. We understand that the state itself is an act of aggression. They hold the power and violate taxes and all that kind of stuff. We're not going to get into the principles of it, but you know what I'm saying. So we understand that, but we understand the value in Trump because he's a tool to an ends. So we've had this debate in a previous podcast that we don't 100% get along with Trump and all of his policies, but it's a lot more closer aligned to achieving what we want, which is individual freedom and liberty, than you would get with someone on the left like Hillary and that stuff. So I would love to see Alex and Joe get back together and do another podcast, because I can't understand why Joe has taken this anti-gun approach and kind of bought into the left with these last few guests that he's had on, and have kind of been bashing Trump hardcore. So hopefully he has Alex back on, and then we can see them ideas debated out. So yeah, that's all I would add to Joe.
Well, yeah, and actually, I'm just I want to hear your opinion on this, because it's something that we were going to discuss, actually, because we kind of touched down to it. You started to touch into it, and it's this whole thing with Trump. Because it really did disturb me tremendously to hear him say such a thing as, oh, let's just take their guns and then worry about due process later. But once again, and you brought up the potential for maybe Trump playing this 4D chess thing. I believe that may very well be potential. I want to hear your thoughts on it. For me, though, it's just a disturbing way. There's lots of ways, and I mean, Trump should know, because I mean, obviously he's all about branding, right? So Trump knows and the art of the deal, and marketing and branding is something that this man should know and understand intrinsically. But that seems to be a weird basis, a weird starting point, unless it's just as a means to once again send the media into a tailspin, get them all hyped up and using their hyperbole and their fear-mongering tactics. That is a potential. I don't do that for a minute, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on with him using that kind of language? Like I say, I mean, you got a lot of hardcore people that were full-on Trump supporters that are now like backing off and like, whoa, what's up with this shit?
Well, if you look at Trump running through his campaign, and even just a little while ago, I remember him doing an interview, I think it was with Fox News, and it was a video call, and literally his words that he said, he likes to say that about a lot of his policies, says, there's no one who's more stronger for the Second Amendment than me. That's literally what he said, and then he comes out a couple weeks after this, when the school shootings, and makes these absurd remarks, so that leads me to believe anyone that says Trump is stupid, they're stupid, because you don't get to be a multi-billionaire and have the success he has in business by being someone who's stupid. So we can eliminate that. And we know Trump has always understood, because you just listened to him speak on the campaign trailer before in the earliest time of his presidency, he understood that guns wasn't the problem. So it made me really sit and reflect on these comments. It's like Trump knows these policies he's going to pass isn't going to stop any kind of the shootings that he wants, that the media is pushing. So he knows these policies won't work. So why did he say it? So that's what made me think maybe this is some 4D chess he's playing, because he's played 4D chess in the past, where things like, who knows if he said, remember the comment where he said, oh, we don't want to take in people from shithole countries. Why can't we take in people from, Norway or Poland, whatever country he said. Now, that was maybe not the right way to say it, but it started a conversation in the media that, wait, other cultures are not as good as other cultures. I mean, they're shithole countries is a reality. You go to Haiti and some of these other places, and there's raw sewage in the street, and there's not really that much infrastructure and a democratic society. Their governments are clearly authoritarian and very corrupt. So that started the conversation of differences between cultures and societies and governments. So it made me wonder, maybe Trump said this to kind of light the fire in the right's ass, to be able to be like, whoa, they're really coming after our guns here, guys, and let's take their guns first and due process second, to start the conversation. This is what the left want to do. They want to label you mental, label you Nazi or whatever, all these other terms they want to label you. And then if they have these regulations and gun control aspects on the books that they can take your guns if they feel that you're a threat or that you're unstable, that this is a way that they can circumvent and getting around to taking your Second Amendment rights. So was Trump playing 4D chess? Because I don't believe that Trump truly thinks that passing bump stock bans and raising the minimum age and all that stuff is actually going to lessen these attacks in the schools and lessen gun violence. So I don't know. I think he maybe have said it to stir up the conversation and kind of make those on the right come out like they did and kind of backlash against him, and now even hunker even more down on the Second Amendment, whereas kind of before we were kind of just maybe getting a little bit more lazy and complacent with the rights being taken in the gun conversation. So maybe he made these remarks to kind of light that fire, the brush fires of liberty in the men's hearts, to push us to the next step of being aggressive in defending the Second Amendment, because there's just no way Trump truly believes these things. He's too smart for that.
Or maybe, this is something I've been kind of rolling around in my head a little bit, or maybe, just maybe, Mr. Art of the Deal here is just reading chapter, 3 from Marketing 101 is just like Obama, and people have said this many times. Obama, every time he tried to put forth and present a dialogue or a narrative that's all about taking the people's gun rights, or even the potential threat of that, gun sales went up to historical levels. So maybe that was Trump's way of softballing to the NRA. Here you go. Hey, Obama's not Obama's not the only one that can help you sell guns, because, well, as the American people have shown time and time again, the minute there's any potential threat to their Second Amendment, they're looking to stockpile. So I don't know. Like I say, it's all just, that's just me throwing out ideas. But what I want to offer another thing, when you were talking about Trump, people say, oh, he's an idiot or whatever. What I want to suggest is, when I hear people say that Trump, oh, he's not that smart, he's an idiot, and he's just one of these kind of guys who just wants to be a bully. Well, he's getting people around him that are very competent. So he's created a multi-billion-dollar business, and his name is known worldwide. So people might say, oh, that's not Trump. He's just got a lot of people that are much wiser and smarter than him that he surrounds himself with, that doing all the groundwork, doing all the footwork that has made his name, his brand so popular. Well, how did they get there? Whether you want to give Trump, kudos for him being the intelligent person for implementing his own ideas, or outsourcing them to someone else, he was ultimately the one that got to outsource the ideas. So either if you're saying he's incompetent himself, well, he obviously has the ability to read people, because he seems to be able to pick people that seems to be able to put forth, implement the kind of things that he wants to do, and do it on a very profitable and cost-benefit basis. So no matter how you look at it, no matter which perspective, no matter what kind of political propaganda these opinion makers, these political pundits in the establishment media try to put forth, I don't care if you want to give Trump all the credit, or the fact that he's just a good person that can read people, right? Maybe if you want to say, oh, he's not super smart himself, maybe he just knows how to read people. Well, then, hey, no matter how it works, it seems to have benefited. So to try to throw him under the proverbial bus because he's a little bit lame or bombastic in his approach, or tweet some things that are controversial, like I say, I can't pretend to know what's in the man's mind. Matt can't pretend, neither can any of these political pundits, all right? Even someone that has known the man, even someone that knows him instinctively don't know what his particular strategy of the day is. They might be able to correlate some of his past habits and behaviors and say, oh, this is a potential. But like I say, listen, human beings, we are not as easily readable as some people like to pretend and perceive. That even goes back to when people talk about economics, like Adam Smith. Humans change on a minute to minute, day to day. I mean, a lot of things about us change on an ongoing basis. So there is none of this one size fits all where you can just psychoanalyze somebody from afar, sitting on your chair, and say that he's just an idiot. You don't know. So in the absence of knowledge is question any premise, any of these opinions that these political propagandists, these media pundits put forth. Now, in addition to this stuff, when you're talking about Trump, and then I remember you brought up Sam Harris. Sam Harris is another one of these guys that, wow. Not just the fact that he has this anti-Trump stance, which to me, once again, most of the time I just look at this stuff as these people are just hedging because they have to function in an environment where they're constantly surrounded by people that would be on the ideologically left part of the spectrum, the political spectrum. What I think they're doing is they're just hedging their bets so that they can walk into these venues or these places where they have to function and not be perceived as, their full ideological components. So like I say, or opponents. So they're just hedging their bets. So Sam Harris is, rather than being truly principled, is basically hedging his bet and saying, yeah, I can agree with some things, but I'm fully against Trump. And to me, the most important thing that I got to say in regards to this whole thing is it's not about the man. It's about the ideas. And as far as with Trump, it's not necessarily all the ideas that I'm necessarily agreeing with him or him as a person. It's the fact that he's allowing a variance of ideas. What we've been accustomed to, whether you're Canadian or American or British or most of us in the Western cultures, if we've become accustomed to a one-size-fits-all collectivist approach, which was basically two wings of the same bird that kept flipping back and forth, whether they were in power, so the Democrats or the Republicans, or in Canada, the Liberals or the Conservatives, or in the UK, the Labour Party and the Conservatives. It's all about at least giving people, sending that bull in the china shop to at least shake things up to the point where you're hearing something other than the constant hammering and dictates, which is just, you got to pick one or the two. Trump was at least a third option, and we've seen this even during the whole presidential race. You had all kinds of establishment neocons and these Republicans that were vying for top spot, POTUS. Then you had the Democrats. You had Hillary Clinton. You're basically leftist neocon, neo-lib or whatever you want to call them. And then you had her counterpart that was Bernie, the socialist. They go, but instead of this, and it was all collectivist bullshit. Trump was the only one that stepped in and said, I'm going to give you, instead of just pure politics, let me give you a business example. Let me give you a business narrative. Because if you think about society as a whole, and especially when you're talking about politics, economics is a huge driver. And if you can get to the point where you can drive home some free market aspects of the economy, although right now I actually kind of shouldn't even bring this in, because Trump with this trade protection and tariffs on steel and aluminum, that's a little bit counterproductive. Although once again, I see that side of the equation where you have so many, this is the problem, folks, and I'm going to tie this up real quick as far as covering this thing, but when you're talking about free trade, there's so much protectionism that happens. Now, you can point to Trump right now and say, oh, that's bad because he's creating barriers to trade by introducing these tariffs. But what you're not taking into account is all the already pre-existing barriers to trade. So what it is now it's when there's an absence of genuine free trade, because there's been an absence of genuine free trade, throughout this whole time, throughout the 2000s, the 90s, the 80s, there is no genuine free trade because governments are the one that gets to set the mandates and the dictates as far as trade. So protectionism already is entrenched and established in all the political systems in the Western world. What Trump's doing is saying is we're just going to, because, we're quite a powerhouse. Like, U.S. people don't realize this in Canada. When I hear people talk about, oh well, we can just we'll fight fire with fire. Well, we'll fucking do our own trade wars and battles with the Trump administration. Okay, but what you don't understand is the Americans are already mostly self-reliant, if need be. They had established a system where now they've outsourced a lot in the last few decades, but the U.S. is very easily and willing and capable to adapt to being a completely closed off nation that could provide for its own security, its own resources, its own services, its own products, its own financial system. I mean, it's already the world reserves currency on the planet, folks. So there's nothing that Canada or any of these other countries can do. And I'm not trying to defend any of the protectionism, but I'm just saying protectionism does exist. What Trump is doing, though, which is why a lot of the people will plug their nose and defend him, regardless of whether it's genuine free trade, what they're saying is at least he's trying to create a more fair playing field where the American people aren't the ones at the lower end of the bargaining platform, of the bargaining table. So at least they have the capacity to push back against some of these globalists that have been using the free market fundamentals of the U.S. to impose their own tariffs, barriers, and restrictions on free trade. So this trade war, I'm not a defender of it in any way. I'm like people, I'm in totally agreement with people like Stossel, John Stossel, and listen to what he's got to say if you want to. He's the kind of person that, like me, in an ideal world, we would have no barriers to trade. As far as economic activity, if I want to trade with someone in anywhere around the planet, there shouldn't be any restrictions to that. Now, my customers might require me to have certain standards, and that's appropriate. That's completely appropriate. I know if me as a consumer, I'm all for free trade, but I'm not going to buy any product or I'm not going to use any service if people use immoral methods or means to create their platform or to offer their service, just like a product. I don't want to necessarily buy a product if someone's using slave labor. That's the beautiful thing about having a free market, having actual genuine competition, is people that are more concerned with moral acts and moral behaviors in the market have a choice and they can go elsewhere. The problem I see today, though, is Trump's just doubling down on the fact that he cares about the American people, and it's no longer, I'm just not going to allow everyone to outsource everything and what Americans are all about and making them reliant on actors in countries that they have no capacity to control what happens in some of these foreign countries. So Trump's more or less saying, just like if you were a person that lived in a community and all your neighbors started turning against you or were taking advantage of you, well, even though you might want to trade with your neighbors, if they're not treating you properly, well, then you'll say, okay, listen, I'm going to rely on my family. I'm going to rely on. And that's what farmers do. A lot of them are just families where I know that they're dependable and I know they're going to be loyal to me and I know we care about each other. So Trump's protectionism might not sound good in the most purest, most utopian sense, and we would all love to get to the full-on free trade. But at least he's willing to show that he's standing up for the domestic population, the people that, he is the president of the United States, so he does have to care about his people. The people that are his constituents. And anyone that has a problem with that is telling me, well, what is your agenda? What is your agenda if you don't care about your domestic population? Now, if you want to put forth an argument that maybe some of these foreign countries, whether it's Canada, whether it's the UK, whether it's some of these Middle Eastern OPEC countries, if you want to hold everyone to account and say, hey, they shouldn't be able to price fix, like look at fucking OPEC, my God. Or like Canada with our dairy, with our protectionist dairy products. It's not just devastating to us in Canada, the prices we have to pay for our dairy products, but it's obviously affecting even the market in the US. So once you start down that protectionist road, and I don't care, I'm not all about picking any particular country and saying that's, they're the reason, that particular, whether it was Roosevelt or Johnson or anyone, I don't care, or in Canada, I don't care which particular political party or actor that started this protectionist bullshit. To me, that's not what's important. What's important is that this stuff does happen, and it happens in every country. So because we are divvied up into countries, we're not a global community as much as these globalists try to talk about this shit. We are a bunch of individuals. We're a bunch of individual nations, and we have particular things that we're good at. And if there are countries that are trying to impose restrictions or trade barriers or tariffs or excise taxes or anything that restricts or limits or impedes our trade, of course, there's going to be retaliatory effect. I'm against all of that. But don't think for 1 minute that the American people are not going to stand up and try to defend themselves in this modern world. They know that they've seen the middle part of America hollowed out as a result of a lot of this trade indifference and outsourcing and trying to rely on these crony corporations and businesses that don't seem to care about their domestic population as much as they do about the bottom line.
Yeah, so one thing I would bring back, I want to bring it back to Sam Harris. I have a few points I'd add about Sam Harris. So what made me start listening to Sam Harris? I've listened to him for a while, and I think he brings a lot of value when he talks about Islam, and that's pretty much what brought him into fame, is talking and criticizing Islam. And what always baffled me about Sam Harris, and not to mention, I mean, he won't ever debate Molyneux, and so many of his viewers and Molyneux's viewers and even Molyneux himself would like to debate Sam Harris because I think they would bring a lot of value to that conversation if they had that debate. But like I said, Sam Harris's big thing was tackling Islam and the dangers of Islam as a religion, how it can be more violent and have violent tendencies than any other religion. Let's give a basic example. I can draw a picture of Jesus, bash on him all the time. The Christians will turn the other cheek, may not agree with it, but turn the other cheek type of thing. You can draw pictures of Buddha, but you draw a picture of Muhammad, well, watch out. Or you can see the violent tendencies with Islam. So he's very good at calling that out. And who would have been the one who would have brought in people from Muslim Islam countries and bring them in by mass numbers would have been Hillary Clinton. Trump's whole thing was build a wall, stop these refugees from coming in that have different values. And I would encourage people to think about it too. Why doesn't the Middle East look like America or Canada? Really though, why over there is it acceptable to throw gays off roofs in some of the countries, to not give women rights? I mean, look at Saudi Arabia. They just recently, last year, let women drive. So why are there these different values in these countries? It's because obviously the majority of people agree with them. Because if you tomorrow started throwing gays off of buildings in America, think of the protests, think of the outcry. So they would never get away with that in America because the people would revolt against it. So how is it that in the Middle East, gays and stuff like that through ISIS threw off the buildings and there's no massive revolts and to stop that kind of stuff? It's obviously because not all Muslims, but a majority adhere to those values. That's why the Middle East looks like the Middle East and Western societies look like Western societies. There's differences in cultures. Now, we can have the debate about the IQ and whether that's it or whether it's environmental or whether it's cultural, but just for the sake of the debate here, obviously there's differences. So Sam Harris understands that these cultures have things that don't align with our values. So he's going to bash Trump, the guy who's literally saying, build a wall, stop these people from rushing in the border to change our values, to outbreed us, because people coming from the Middle East have a lot more kids per family than us here in the Western nation. We only have, an average of 2 or so, whereas in the Middle East they have like 5, 6, 7 kids a family. So we would literally be outbred if we just keep bringing in these mass immigration policies. So why the hell is Sam Harris bashing the guy that's literally putting an end to shipping in people who adhere to Islamic values and is kind of more in favor of Hillary, which would be the one that would bring in the people that he so adamantly does debates on stage all the time to argue against? So it's very hypocritical that. And literally I heard Sam Harris, because I listened to one of his podcasts recently, and his exact words were, "Why I understand why people want to talk about the differences between race and IQ, but why do people fixate on that?" I think he had Charles Murray, who wrote the Bell Curve on, and they had a debate about this stuff and race and IQ. So Harris is very well aware from the differences between races and IQ, and yet his exact words in that podcast were, "I understand there's differences, but what's the point of fixating on it?" Well, the point that people fixate on it is because maybe there's it's these values that you gain through the higher intelligence. Now a lot of people, when they talk about race and IQ, immediately the people will label you as a racist. But I always bring it back to philosophy, and the concept of racism is believing one race is superior than another. Superior is objective. A fish is superior to me. He can swim underwater and breathe underwater. I can't. So obviously a fish is more superior than a human when it comes to living in an underwater environment. Well, obviously we could build stuff and technology to make us breathe in there, but you get the point of the argument I'm trying to make here. So superior is objective. So Chinese people are superior when it comes to mathematics and computers and all that kind of stuff. And on average, Asians have a higher IQ than white people. But you never see white people saying, "Oh, we hate the Asians. Oh, we're inferior than the Asians." No, it's just they bring different value to society. Now, blacks excel when it comes to sports and athletics. I mean, some of the fastest runners in the world. Look at the NBA. Look at the NFL. So there's just differences in superior is objective, and there's differences. So if you want someone who's very athletic, well, the black race seems to do very well in that. If you want someone who's very good with computer and analytics and stuff, well, the Asians. If you want to find a race that's very good when it comes to developing democracy and stuff, it seems that it was birthed out of Greece and Rome and these Western societies. So I hate when people talk about racism and talk about, oh, you're racist because you believe other races are superior. You got to start breaking down, what does that even mean? Of course people are superior in other aspects. We bring different values. That doesn't mean I hate black people because I think that they're better in certain areas and I'm better in certain areas than them in that. So the whole racism topic needs to be addressed back to its original form. Like, you need to start breaking it down when people say, oh, well, what do you mean superiority? Well, what does that mean? And we have a hard time doing that. So, but yeah, I just wanted to bring up the Sam Harris thing, that it's very weird that this guy is anti-Islam, and yet he bashes Trump, who is the only one that was going to stop refugees who adhere to Islamic values coming in and overpopulating our population and changing the culture. So, Sam Harris, you need to check yourself on that and stop getting behind bashing Trump. Meanwhile, he's the guy who is the number one that would push your platform. So that's all I'd add to Harris.
Yeah, well, when it comes to that stuff, the big divide that I see between Christianity and Islam is three things, actually. Reformation, the Enlightenment era, and secularism. Those were the three fundamental changes that Western societies undertook that changed from the old world way of reading and perceiving an authority, which was in biblical form, it would have been the Old Testament. Reformation, the Enlightenment era, and secularism was all about more or less using scientific observations, equations, removing that blind faith, that mystical belief in an overarching authority, whether like the pretense of God, but it was also about keeping and entrenching morality. So we understood when we went to from the old religions of the Old Testament, the old teachings of the Old Testament, to the New Testament, it went from collectivization, which is basically what most religions are based upon, the sacrifice of the individual for the greater good, the collective, to an individual and create an ideal individual. And Jesus Christ was the one, and because he did it on a voluntary basis, there wasn't this pretense that you must. There was no such thing with Jesus when the New Testament was written. There was no longer a basis that you must sacrifice yourself at the altar of any particular deity, whether it's land-based or in some mystical realm outside of our observable universe. It was all about Jesus, which was an ideal, right? He chose to voluntarily sacrifice himself. So there was no imposition of authority. It was a choice. It was a moral choice that he made to try to help save humanity. Now, these are things that you don't have to understand every verse or every aspect of biblical teachings. But to me, what matters most, what the culmination of the Enlightenment era, the Reformation, and secularism and the scientific model as a means to understand the world that we live in, is that the emphasis was on the individual. And if you're going to have any societal structures, it has to be based on individual rights. Because the minute you create a pretense, which all other religions do, where the individual really is nothing, it doesn't mean anything, because the individual is just meant to be sacrificed for the greater good, or the religion, or your country, or, you know, your ideology. Well, then you've destroyed, because we're all individuals, so you've destroyed what it is to be a viable individual human being that has the capacity to think critically for yourself and to, you know, do whatever you want to do to create a happy environment, a prosperous environment, and a meaningful environment for yourself and your family, as long as you abide by some very basic rules. Don't hit, don't steal, you know, the whole, so simple things that even just young kids, when we teach them, they understand them intrinsically. Islam is completely void so far. They have not gone through the Reformation moment. When they do, you know, I'm sure that the people that abide by that faith will be, maybe in a, I don't know how long it'll take, maybe a couple hundred years, they will be much more secular. You know, especially if a lot of these ones that actually come to some of our Western countries and live amongst our Western cultures, they probably do think more along. And I mean, I've known people from many different backgrounds, races, and cultures that are actually very much astute and understanding of what it means to be an individual. Well, that's probably the main reason why they're here. They rejected that whole sacrificial collectivism bullshit of their old countries or the religions that was constantly espoused in them. But Sam Harris, the other thing that kind of bothers me with him is, and I don't understand this argument. Listen, I get it as far as like if you want to use that for internal dialogue or just to come up with some different concepts. I get the whole thing why people might want to study determinism versus free will. But to me, and others have tried to point out to him as well, he tries to always put forth this premise that that he believes in determinism and not free will. Well, if you think we're all just, you know, gears in a car or cogs in a machine, or that everything we do is based on just our biology and we don't have any ability to think for ourselves and everything we go through is just the flows, the motions of life, well then you've already inadvertently taken away a person's own autonomy and their own personal responsibility. And once you've taken away a person's autonomy and their personal responsibility, well, I don't know what I don't even understand. I've never even heard him articulate the reason. What kind of world would you live in, Sam, if everybody believed in this bullshit? That we're all just, I don't know, like what, hooked up like in the Matrix and everything's predetermined for us? What kind of a life would a person truly lead if they believed that they have no way to change or affect anything going forward in their life, that they're just, I don't know, like I say, just pre-programmed robots? I just don't understand. I mean, dig into that stuff as much as you want. I just don't understand until you've got it. So that, listen, like I said, if you were Galileo or Newton and you've made some massive discovery that you could prove conclusively, then yes, let the world know, because truth is beautiful. But because it's still speculation, it's a hypothetical, it's still a theory, I don't understand why he even tries to constantly put forth and present this dialogue, this narrative on the big stage. What is your intention? What, to try to make it so that you're different than everyone else? I mean, whatever, can't you find another way? We're all human beings. We all have to live in this world, and we have to have, you know, we all break it down to every individual. You want to be happy, but you also want to have a meaningful life. You know, love. These things cannot be considered predetermined. You can't. Why would I don't even think. Why would I even worry about, oh, what kind of lady would I want to pick? You know, what kind of thing would intrigue me if I just thought, oh no, never mind, it's all figured out for me. Don't worry, I'll just meet her eventually because I guess that's my predetermined destination. That's just bullshit. That's bullshit. To me, that's another way to take away personal responsibility, personal accountability, and your ability to be a moral actor in an immoral or a potentially immoral world. Free will gives you the ability and the competence to say, no, I'm doing things because I choose to do this.
Yeah, so we're at over an hour now, so we'll probably wrap it up here. But my final segment that I would like to talk about is I always like to try to end these conversations with a bit of positivity, because we dwell on the negative for a majority of this interview, and I'd like to always wrap it up with some positivity. So one of the things I want to point out to people is the media manipulation to make small things look large. So what I mean by that is, I work in the public, and I work with people of all races, religions, creed, all that kind of stuff. And Majority of people I talk to, including people from Pakistan, people from India, people from Sudan, I work with these type of people from all over the country, different cultures, and I can never find them that are these raving lunatic lefties that spout the type of stuff that you see in the media today. These Antifa and these people that call you racist, misogynist. I've literally had conversations with people from the Middle East who are like, we came to Canada because we didn't like the values in which we lived under. Why else would we be here? Why would you leave your home country and move to another country unless you felt that the place you're moving was better than the place you left? So clearly they moved here because they loved our values. So majority of these people I talk to are like, yeah, build the wall. Yeah, people shouldn't just be able to come in here illegally. We came through the process. We came through legally. We come over here. We did all the right things, and we love the values. That's why we're here. And why would we want to cover our women once we come over here? Why would we want to act the way we did in the Middle East? We could have stayed in the Middle East. So, and the media is very, very good at controlling the narrative and controlling your thoughts and making it look like Antifa and these lefties and these people who are anti-free speech and label you white privilege and that they got these big, powerful, organized group, when actually they're not. They're a very, very, very small minority of the population. I would say you probably, if I had to take a wild guess and pull figures out of my ass, I'd say maybe 15% of the population adheres to our values and the right, free market, freedom of the individual rights, free speech, all that kind of stuff. Then you're probably like 5% of people who are actually your social justice warriors, Antifa. They're a very, 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 very small minority. And then you probably got vast majority of the population, which is like 70, 60% who isn't even that really in tune with politics, who doesn't really have that much of an opinion, but understands basic common sense things. And it's kind of like, yeah, we understand where Trump's coming from, blah, 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 blah. And that's the majority of the population. Every time, I literally am going out every day I go to work and looking to run into that person who's the Antifa, anti-fascist, these type of people that you see that we're fighting against, and I can't find them. Now, if you go to a protest event, of course you're going to run into them because you're going to an event organized where they're either supposed to be showing up or they're coming to show up to shut you down. So that's why it looks like it when you watch these videos that they're so organized and they're in a big group. But in all reality, they're not. So to end this thing and to make it sound positive is, don't let the media do that to you. Just like how they focus on the school shootings. You're more likely to go out and die of eating too much McDonald's cheeseburgers and having high cholesterol. You're more likely to die driving to work in a car accident just by having an accident, someone not paying attention, or the roads not being clear and you slip on some ice. So there are many ways out there that are way higher risks of dying at the end of the day than a guy walking in, screaming Allah Akbar and shooting up a school. It's a very, 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 very small chance of that happening, and the amount of people that it doesn't happen to is vast majority. Same with the police brutality thing. And I even was bad in some of my earlier years. I definitely piled on the police and them shooting. And yes, we should address the bad cops that are out there. But let's say that 10,000 people last year got shot by police, and let's say that they're 100% wrong. Like, these cops actually were murdering people that they shouldn't have. There was also millions upon millions upon millions of traffic stops that went on that year where there was nonviolent interactions, where nobody got shot and murdered. So the media always narrows in on the negative and makes it out to be a way bigger thing, that watch out, terrorists are coming to kill you in your schools, when you're more likely to die driving to work. Watch out, police are murdering black people in the streets, when 90% of the interactions with black people, they don't get killed. So, just keep that in mind, that we're actually winning the culture war. We're winning the meme wars. Our side is back with truth and logic, and truth and logic will always prevail. It'll always outbeat these lefties because, well, the facts add up to the facts, and I see it. We're winning the culture war. More people are attuning to our side and joining our side versus the left. So be very careful not to get in that, because I found myself getting into it thinking that I started to get a little down on myself, thinking that we're not going to get out of this, the left are shutting us down, blah, 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 blah. And that's the media manipulation. They're very well at doing it to make you feel like you're little and you're defeated. But actually the truth is the right is strong. We're united. We have differing opinions, but we respect each other's opinions. And we're a growing movement where the left are shrinking. So we're winning the war. Keep up the good work, everyone. And I would just like to say, that keep the positive attitude. Don't fall for that media manipulation.
Yeah. Oh, right on, Matt. And you know what? When it comes to that stuff, what I've deciphered, just running through this stuff constantly in my mind is what I think when I dig down into it, what I think about these leftist ideologues, or even people on the right, but predominantly what we're seeing today are these leftist ideologues. But what I see, or what I perceive when I hear them talking, is they're projecting their own internal monologue. So these are people that themselves, if they were in that particular position of authority, right? If they were king for the day, they would very well be, and look at them. Who are the ones out there that are throwing people into these collective camps, right? It's those in the media, it's the political leftists. These are the ones that are trying to divvy us up into these categories, right? These people that are all about, cultural or identity politics and pitting people, men against women, races against races. They're the ones that seem constantly, it seems to be the only thing they care about is this identity politics as a means to an end. So to me, they're projecting, like, to me, now I'm not a psychologist, maybe Jordan Peterson could better expand on this, but that seems to me that's someone that's basically projecting their own internal monologue that is suggesting that that's how they think, so they automatically assume that everyone else thinks the same way. And because they surround themselves, this is what we do, all human beings do this. We kind of try to surround ourselves with usually like-minded type of people. So for the most part, most of us function most of the time in predominantly echo chambers. Now, there are those of us like you or I who constantly, because we're always looking to expand and enlighten ourselves and educate ourselves, we're willing to put ourselves into these positions where we hear, alternative opinions. And that's actually the only time I've ever learned or grown intellectually, is when I was willing to hear and allow information discerned and disseminated towards me, where I was willing to not just hear it and rail against it, but listen to what they're saying and understand, wait a minute, that kind of makes sense. That's the only time actually that I've truly changed as far as my preconceived notions or my concept, is by listen intently, and if it makes sense, if it's logically consistent, if it has a moral basis, if it's built on reason and logic, it's like, damn, I'm going to have to reject some of this stuff I used to think. Now, these ideologues, and it's predominantly, like I say, most of the left, it's all, trust me, the right-wingers are out there too. The only difference is they don't have the platform anymore. They've been thrown at the back of the bus. But there are right-winger ideologues as well. But the leftists are the ones that now seem to be dominant in, well, like I say, academia, the media, and in politics. And their constant projecting of their own internal dialogue and their own monologue is something that we have to push back against. We have to hold up the mirror to these people. Stop allowing them to make you feel guilty. Like, not you, Matt, but the people that are watching these. Don't allow these people to make you feel guilty and think, oh, yes, I am a white male. And geez, you know what? Damn, my parents had money, so I should feel guilty about that. No, listen, if you're a moral person, just use common sense. Like I said, folks, these people try to make things way too difficult, and that's usually what these propagandists do. And a lot of these academics is they make it sound like, and they use these words and the terminology to make it sound like you're just so stupid that you'll have to yield to their authority. Don't fall for the bullshit. Use your own common sense, use logic, use reason, use your own personal anecdotal and subjective experience, but use that and compare it and contrast to anyone else when you talk about it, and you'll understand that, wait a minute, most of us, the majority of us out here, we're just, well, like I say, we're just trying to get through life. Most of us just want to be happy. We want to be prosperous. We want to have meaning. We want to have love. There are things that we mostly care about. But there are a small segment in any society, no matter where you go around the world, that have that authoritarian tendency. They have that belief system entrenched in them where it's my way or the highway. And the thing that bothers me most, and I'll tie this up, is people like myself are libertarians, anarchists, voluntarists, free thinkers, critical thinkers, independents. These are people saying, I'm fully willing to accept that there's all kinds of different people and opinions and variances and religions. The only thing we ask is you can't force your shit on me, and I won't force my shit on you. So when you hear this, right, that is the one thing that you need to compare yourself against, is what are these other people doing? They're trying to, now they're using the pretense of benevolence, they're using your emotions, they're using all these fucking tricks up their sleeve, which is what snake oil salesmen or the deceptive, or the malevolent deceptive people among us, they know how to appeal to your emotions, to your sensitivity. If they're using that as a means so that they can impose their will on you, you should automatically recognize them, that they have an authoritarian streak within them. And I don't care if it's your friend, I don't care if it's your neighbor, I don't care if it's a coworker, I don't care if it's a person from a political party that you happen to identify with, if you don't take it upon yourself to reject people, even people that you might, somewhat align with, if you don't take it upon yourself to reject these people for the sake of respecting all that has been built up over 2,000 years, the culmination of 2,000 years of philosophical thinking, all the way back from Plato, Socrates, Aristotle to today. If you are unwilling to reject all this amazing knowledge that we have gained over the culmination of 2,000 years for the sake of identifying with a particular tribe, with a particular gang, with a particular collective, or a particular ideology, you are the one that's a part of the problem. It's those of us that are saying, listen, I'm me, I have a certain way I like to do things, but I won't impose myself on you. You have to at least start and understand it's not left versus right, folks. It's authoritarians versus, now if you don't want to use the libertarians, but people that just have a live, let live mentality. I don't care if you don't want to identify as a libertarian, that's totally up to you. Identify however way you see fit. But ultimately, the people like myself are not looking to impose our edicts, our mandates, our wills, our preferences on you. We're just saying, I want to have the freedom to experience my life how I see fit, as long as I'm not imposing it on anyone else. So we'll tie this video up. Thank you, Matt, very much for doing this once again.
Yeah, I just have one more thing I'd add before we close it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I just think that we should definitely understand where this comes from, and I think we need to take an approach that's more empathetic towards these people. Not in the sense that if you got anti-fascists who are beating you up, attacking you, and trying to shut down your speech, you have every right to defend yourself. So I'm not saying that you need to be a wussy in that sense, but understand that that chubby, green-haired feminist who's sitting on the top of a hill screaming about how men are terrible, understand that there's a very, very, very high likelihood that she was surrounded when she grew up by shitty quality men. Maybe she had a terrible father, maybe she was molested by some men. So I always like the saying that said, walk a mile in someone's shoes and you'd understand. So maybe understand that maybe in her view, men are pigs and misogynists because the people that she's grown up around has been pigs and misogynists, and that's where her ideals and this activism is coming from, because it's all she knows. And what we need to do is kind of be empathetic to these people and say, listen, understand that was your experience growing up, but 90%, 95% of men out there are doing good and are good fathers and are good husbands and good brothers and all this other aspect. Same with the black man who screams racism and police are racist. Maybe they're, I'm not saying that there aren't racist cops out there. There's always going to be some people bad in every job. I'm not saying that there isn't men out there that treat women horrible and who are misogynists. But just understand it's a small percentage of people. So that black guy who's screaming against inequality, maybe him on an individual level was pulled over by a crappy cop who did treat him bad on the basis of his skin. But we need to educate these people, understanding that that's a small population. That's not the vast majority of interactions between people. So, and I think if we come at it with a more empathetic approach like that, rather than saying stuff like, there's no such thing as the patriarchy, there's no such thing as racist cops, kind of what the right will do sometimes to debunk their arguments, understand that maybe in their 1 in a millionth chance of how they've been raised and their environment led them to believe the way that they are. And I think if we take that approach and understand where their anger and activism is coming from and deal with it accordingly, that'd be a more effective way of dealing with them than how we're doing now. So that's the only thing I'd add in closing.
Right on, Matt. You know what? You're wise beyond your years, man. No, but that's absolutely right. And that's actually something that I've been trying to do better myself, and being less confrontational, because, the problem that we all have, especially when people are using government. Here's the problem, folks. Here's the problem. If we all just sat down and we're having dialogue, no matter how conflicting we might be or how many different varied positions we partake or undertake, it's one thing to have dialogue and disagreement with each other where you can walk away and say, okay, I didn't like this person for this reason. This is where government is the problem. This is where the big, gigantic gun in the room enters in the equation. What causes the most divisiveness, what causes the most pain, the most hardship, the most strife among us is the fact that when people use the political means, right? So what people are doing, if you like these people, like you're saying, that are maybe have had rough time in life, come to people and discuss these things and try to, maybe they'll help you. But if you just go to lobby government, or you try to use the media as a basis so that they can put in a particular party, well, that's automatically, because government is a direct representation of a monopoly of force. The minute somebody's pointing a gun to your head, the negotiating is basically done at that point. Now it's just a matter of fight or flight. And most people, if you have a gun directly pointed at your head, very few people are willing to fight. So most people are going to shrink away from that controversy or hide or scurry off into the corners. So nothing really ever gets accomplished under those kind of scenarios. So listen, Antifa, for any of these people, like you say, these social justice warriors, you know, hey, do your activism, make videos, you know, put out arguments, put out, you know, have debates. Don't try to shut down and silence others that you have, you know, ideological differences with. Maybe sit down and talk to them. Sit down and talk to these people. You might actually come away from that conversation realizing that, hey, these people actually aren't that bad after all. That's, I think, the ultimate thing, and that's why freedom of speech is so important, people. It can't be hammered away enough. I can't say it enough times how important it is to have dialogue, because the minute you break down, you know, without dialogue, what was it Jordan Peterson said? Once you take away dialogue, well, then it's violence or submission. And you know, some people are willing to submit, but there are people in this world who are not willing to submit. So the only alternative outside of, you know, speech is violence. And that's what we're seeing today, whether it's come from these, you know, the far right or these far leftists or whatever. It's, you're pushing people into positions where they probably wouldn't normally want to be, but the human psychology, that fight or flight mechanism, once again, that's built into our biology. So like Matt's saying, show a little bit of understanding. Now, if someone's trying to do, once again, if they're trying to impose their will, their mandates on you politically, you got to push back against that pretty seriously, right? Because this is very important, because it doesn't just have a matter of dealing with a person against another person. It can be entrenched into the body politics, entrenched into how governance happens and how society functions. So we have to push back against anything that wants to go into the political realm. But as far as people having preferences or ideologies or ideas or concepts, hey, once again, live and let live, folks. If you care about freedom, your freedom relies on giving other people their freedoms as well. So I'm going to tie up this video, but like I said, I thank you a whole lot there, Matt, for having this conversation once again. Every time we do, you never cease to amaze me, and I look forward to our next conversation. You have a good one out there, everyone. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and we'll see you next time. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.